Awesome. Well, Karla, thank you so much for coming in. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Alec.
Thank you. Do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and who you are and how you got into the real estate space so we can set the precedent for the rest of the podcast?
Absolutely. So I'm a real estate agent here in Miami, Florida. I've been here in Miami for 10 years. I used to live in Sarasota, Florida before, went to school in all that area back there. And I've been doing real estate for the last, I would say, investing 10 years, selling the last 5 years. It's definitely been a trip.
Got it. So you started your career with investing and then you transitioned into selling.
Correct, yes.
And why did that transition happen? Was it because you loved real estate so much and you were like, I have to do this? Or was it because it's the money or?
You know, it was a transition because initially I was doing investing. And at some point I started going into flipping. I tried everything that you can think on investing just because I wanted to, know a little bit about every area that real estate offers. So I did a flip during that time, and I ended up using another real estate agent to sell it. So automatically I thought, if I'm going to be going into the flipping game, right, I need to get a real estate license and just sell my own properties, right? And then I got the license. I wasn't doing really much with it, but I was still speaking a lot about real estate and building wealth and obviously, talking to everybody else that they should get in the game. And some of my friends, they just told me, hey, you talk so much about real estate. Why don't you just start selling, And I didn't think about it, because I was like, I never saw myself as a real estate agent selling houses, But yeah, I thought it was a great transition. I was already doing sales for another company during that time in corporate. So the transition just seemed like, a no-brainer, especially counting that, in real estate, you don't have any type of like commission caps and things like that.
Unlimited earning potential,
and
right?
You can put as much work as you want and you will get it back.
100%. So I remember when I first got into real estate, and I think a lot of people have this experience, but there's typically a check you get when you flip a property, right? And I don't know what that check was for you, and maybe you're comfortable sharing, maybe not, but for me, it was just $20,000. My first condo was $110,000 up in Wisconsin, so different market. Yeah. I know, can't find a room down here for that much, but I sold it for 6 months later with a $20,000 profit.
Nice.
And I'm like, that's on top of when you're working, right? Like you're still working, whether it be a job or whatever, making $150,000 a year, whatever the case is. So you just add an additional $28,000 on top of that for a little time investment of maybe a move or whatever the case is. So when you get that check, it's like, bam, I can do this over and over and over and over again. And I think that's how so many people get into the real estate space like yourself, is like they see that and they're like, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So you want to dive into like that first check, the feelings, the emotions, the process maybe of what that flip was like dealing with the contractors. Can we dive a little deeper in that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the first one that I did prior to going into that flip was I literally had bought a property back in 2012. And I sold it in 2016 for like a $60,000 profit.
Crazy.
That was my first time, but I had actually bought it, held it, rented it. I was cash flowing somewhat for sure. And then I saw that, when I needed to actually sell it, right? I wish I would have held it by now, honestly, because it would have been like over a $200,000, honestly, increase with 2020, increasing prices.
I'm part of that increase in prices. I came down from Wisconsin during the COVID time.
I think about it and I'm like, I should have just held it. But, that's it. You live and you learn. And it's really a game whenever you are ready to really sell, right? So that was my first experience on how much really you can build wealth through real estate by learning to wait, Outside of that, when I did the flip, I got into a little bit of what is called the wholesaling game. I bought a property from a wholesaler. I wasn't the wholesaler, and I did a flip through that. I learned a lot through the process because it's a lot more complicated to do a flip than what you think. I usually say to people, from what I learned on that experience, that flipping properties or doing wholesaling is a job. Like that's your job. I don't.
You're a project manager or a general contractor, essentially.
You have to be involved.
The laborers too. I feel like it's such an interesting group of people, and it really comes down to the management of the people, because these people are flighty.
Yep.
Right. Sometimes they overbook themselves on jobs, and then they can't come to your project, but you're spending money holding the property, waiting for it to be completed. So what I typically do in contracts with general contractor is I will fine them if they don't finish it by X date.
Yeah.
And what I find myself doing is like, okay, maybe it'd be $5,000 or $10,000 reduction if they don't hit a certain date. The last property I flipped here in Miami, I got a $5,000 reduction because they didn't complete it.
That's so good.
I hold them to it.
Yeah.
And they don't show up to work. Typically, those people have to be paid weekly in cash because
or in phases, right? The deposits schedule that you have with them.
Yeah, so you'll pay the general contractor in those like deposits.
Yeah.
But that general contractor down to the laborer
Correct.
is typically weekly.
Correct.
Right? So it's such an interesting game. I don't speak Spanish, right? So dealing with that down here, and I've heard crazy stories about contractors ripping people off and da 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 da. So I mean, I understand where you're going with this is like, it can be overwhelming if you haven't done it. It is a full-time job because you have to go to the site, make sure they show up, make sure the materials are there. It's a process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, you know, the beauty of real estate is that you can choose where you want to focus on, right? During that time, I decided to dive into a little bit of everything just to see what I liked,
100%.
right? So I dived into the flip game, but I quickly realized that, you know, I don't want to be behind people. If I do it, I would have to be super prepared with, you know, a really good, trustworthy contractor, you know, that you can trust over and over. But yeah, just for the fact of flipping a property back and forth all the time, I really consider it to me a job. So that would have to be my job, you know, to be doing that consistently and obviously see the fruits of that. You know, so I learned my lesson, like, you know, that wasn't for me to do it consistently. So I flipped right away into the sales side, you know, which was basically helping people acquire their properties, right? So that was it. And then ongoing, I'm still an investor. I still find properties, right, that I want to either hold, not particularly flip. I mean, I take a very few of those, but they have to be in, you know, pretty okay condition. I, you know, definitely go in and do some updates, but nothing that is going to take, you know, like months of work, you know.
The cosmetics, right?
Yeah, the cosmetics, simple things that you can actually, you know,
the
go
kitchen,
in.
the bathrooms, call it easy.
Fix things.
Cast iron pipes make things troublesome.
Oh, believe me, I've done it. I can tell you a story on that
Take
one.
up the floor. You got to run it out all the way to the freaking road.
I can tell you stories on that. It's no joke here in Florida. You know, the cast iron and how, especially if you're doing it for, you know, tenants, right? Because they're going to complain, right? They're going to complain about, you know, the toilet not working or like things getting backed up. You know, you're getting that call at midnight, you know, saying something's happening and you have on a weekend, you know, so.
Okay, two interesting points that I want to talk about so I don't forget. I'm going to say it and then let's dive in.
Right.
The first being, can you tell us a story about the cast iron pipes? Secondarily, I want to dive into solving the problem a little bit or kind of dealing with the typical headaches that a real estate owner has with the tenants. Because I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about it, how easy it is to actually remediate that. So first, can you tell us a story about the... Yeah,
I mean, I can tell you the one that I got that was kind of more urgent. I bought a fourplex back in 2020. Best investment I made, honestly. Like,
where is it?
Miramar.
Miramar?
Yeah, when people were actually like just holding from buying or scared, you know, in the middle of being all closed, you know, was definitely one of the best investments I made with a beautiful interest rate. So yeah, it was the best investment. But in the flip side of that, you know, having to deal with 4 tenants at a time, right? And after a year, within a year, started getting a lot of complaints on like one of the units particularly getting backed up consistently, you know, the toilet not working or things coming through the shower. It was just a mess, right? So after a year of going through, you know, sending plumbers in and out to like, you know, unplug things, right? I ended up deciding that, you know, I need to see how I can change the cast iron. I had already been told it was cast iron, you know, and obviously it was a property from 57, so over 50 years of age, right? So I ended up deciding doing, you know, calling the plumbing company and seeing how I could go about, you know, changing the whole cast iron system without impacting my tenants, because the property itself is a fourplex built like in an L shape, so all of them connect. So if one gets messed up, the other ones get messed up. Luckily, after, you know, quoting with a couple of plumbing companies, which I would highly suggest.
Always. Three minimum.
At minimum, yeah. One for pricing, but 2 for solutions, because the first one definitely told me that I needed to break down, you know, flooring. Imagine on 4 units, I have 4 people, you know, options would have been obviously for me to take them out during the project time, right?
Let's just preface to it.
Yeah.
The more work that's in it for the contractor, the more money they make.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same thing with realtors and real estate commission. Like sometimes realtors try to sell property or help people purchase property that shouldn't necessarily be sold or purchased because we want our commission check. Right. So the same goes for general contractors or any other service in the entire world. Right. Everybody has self-motivating interests, and you just have to kind of mitigate that by multiple opinions.
Absolutely. Great point. To that point, you have to definitely talk to multiple people, and especially if you're new in the game, right? This was one area that I didn't know enough about.
They smell that, and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to expose this person."
Of course. But I'm a hard cookie. I ask all the questions, and I let them know, give me your best number, because if you're not giving me your best number, I'm going to 2-3 more people. So you definitely want my business for the longer term or not.
100%.
So I basically quoted with 3. Only one basically gave me a great solution to do everything through the outside. Basically, not having to break all of the plumbing, inside of the property, and taking all of the plumbing outside. So basically, I didn't have to do this whole process of breaking floors, for multiple tenants. It was actually very seamless. They only had to go in one day to each one of the properties to be able to take out the plumbing from the bathroom, particularly to the outside.
Sure.
And that was...
So just put a little hole in the exterior wall, run it outside, and dig the hole, and then bury it, and then it's...
That's it. And then everything that was inside there, it's just left there, right?
Yeah. So I've heard a couple different solutions as far as the cast iron. Sometimes you can slide liners through it, right?
Yes.
The plastic liners. Yes. Sometimes you can do it outside. Sometimes you have to do it inside. It's like you said, it's just so important to get multiple opinions because it could change things drastically.
Yeah. And also, like, some of them may be more cost effective, but you have to think, I always think things in long term. That's one property that I wanted to hold for a while, and I definitely wanted the solution.
Or unit is worth holding.
Yeah.
Condo, no. Single family, no. Duplex, 2. Yep. Duplex, 3, 4. Yep. Those can be very long-term investments that are fruitful. Yeah. And you talked about dealing with 4 tenants, right? That's part of risk mitigation, but also adds a little bit more of operational intensivity to it, because if one unit's vacant, you still got 3 incomes coming in, right? On a single family, you're fried.
Correct.
All your revenue gone.
Yep.
So I think majority of people's goals, and my goal, and just maybe it's your goal as well, but like everybody needs to hold 2, 3, 4 units, because the single families are troublesome. Now, the higher you scale in units, the less risk you have if there's vacancies. Correct. So I think, as we were talking behind the scenes before, is like majority of people's goal is to kind of start small, get their feet wet, experience all these different things, and then trade up and build up to the higher units.
Yeah, almost every client that I talk to that wants to start, investing in real estate, right? They always say, "Oh, should I get just my first house and get my feet wet?" Ideally, honestly, I usually suggest to at least start with a duplex
100%.
Where you can actually live in one side and rent the other. It just helps you in every single way. 100%. And especially if it's in an area that you like.
The banks like it. They'll give you more about it, more favorable loan terms.
It favors you, and you can actually, scale very quickly into your next property, because then now if you want to move into the next property, you will have 2 rents that you can actually put there, right? That will help you for the next property you want to invest or even live,
100%. The second place that I wanted to go with that, I had it, but I lost
it.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Do you remember what I said? I said cast iron and...
managing of tenants.
Managing of tenants? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think we kind of touched on that.
Yeah. Now let's talk about this, because I think this is interesting. You said that your property's all in Sarasota, or majority of it, and then 1 in Miramar?
No, I have 3 in Sarasota, and I have 3 here.
When's the last time you've been to your properties in Sarasota?
Well, let me put it like this. My family lives in Sarasota.
Got it.
So I have a lot of connections over there, throughout the years. I go out maybe once every 2 months, I pass through the properties to check them out. Okay,
so I have 5 properties in Wisconsin, and I haven't been to them in 3 years. And people are like, Alec, how do you manage property and you haven't been there? And blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So what I did is I wrote up a pretty cool article or information sheet that states how to manage property when you're distant from it.
An absent owner.
I think in today's world, it is so easy to collect money via Zelle. right? So like I collect rent on Zelle. Or if it's the Section 8, they deposit it right into my bank account. Same with the VA, right? So Zelle, you can easily collect rent. Now, if you run into an issue and it's like, hey, toilet is leaking, da-da-da. How do I fix this, right? What I always tell my tenants is that it's their responsibility. I try to put as much as I can on them because like in Wisconsin, it snows, you have grass, right. You have all these things. So they take care of snow, they take care of lawn. So that mitigates those two problems. And then if it's a toilet issue, that's on them. And if they give me pushback, okay, I'll swap you out and put Section 8 in there. Because Section 8 does not complain at all because they just want a place to live. And it's like guaranteed money. And Section 8 does inspections every year, right? Yes. So that property has to be kept in a nice condition. So like I get zero pushback. That's basically the options I give. Yes, I'm increasing rent still. Yes, people might look at that as harsh, but okay. Let's say something does happen. The HVAC, the AC goes out. My responsibility. 100% I'm fixing that. Let me tell you how easy it is. And then I want to hear your experience. You go to Google. You type in HVAC contractors near me. You call 3. Get 3 quotes. Talk to the different solutions like we just talked about. And boom, you hire one to go in. Everybody makes it such a big deal as far as like, I'm getting calls at midnight. Like that's... Unless you have like 100 units, like you're not spending much time at all managing these tenants. Like it is so easy and people make it so complicated.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. I think it depends on the type of person that you are. If you have a job that is extremely stressful and you don't want to deal with calls from tenants, you don't have even like, the emotional strength, to handle that, then get a property manager, I wouldn't suggest it in your first properties because I think it's manageable. I've done it, but if you can't do it, then that's okay. You have to do the math if it makes sense, honestly, for the property to pay for that. But that would be my suggestion. I agree. There's so many easy ways for you to be able to manage tenants. Like exactly what you said is exactly the truth. There's so many things that you can put so much more on them, to avoid all these kind of additional questions. And a lot of them do take ownership, especially if it's a single family home, and a whole family is there. If there is a family, usually the man of the household likes to be on top of things and fixes things on their own, unless it's something like the AC system that they, will have to do a big expense on it, right? So absolutely, in my case, when it comes to multifamilies, a little different just because you're interacting with multiple people at a time. And, one might be complaining about something that may impact the other too, So on those items, I usually suggest, to be more on top. But yeah, payments is easy. I'll tell you a story though about property management go wrong. And this is not my own experience, but one of my clients. I work with a lot of international clients, and a lot of them are absent, investors. This one particularly brought two fourplexes down south in Homestead area. Beautiful properties. I think they're great add-on properties, right? Value add. But the property management that they chose during that time was just horrible. They just weren't taking care of stuff. And waiting for things to go really wrong with the property. So just when I went in to be able to sell the properties, I could see what was happening, things like, them quoting the client somewhere else, for a particular price on something and then putting something of a cheaper value in there, that happens. The client usually just gets the bill and pays, but then they're not seeing what is actually being installed inside the property. So those things I think that you have to kind of vet with property management companies. Other things were like tenants complaining to the property management company about ongoing issues with, either water or light or, all these things and them not being taken properly. So things like, for example, leaks that could actually affect the foundation and everything on the property ended up being left, without a resolution for a long period of time. So then it created mold, and that's a whole thing. You definitely don't want to delay fixing anything for a tenant that could definitely turn into mold or any bigger issue because it's going to cost you.
Anything with water.
It's going to cost you.
I flipped a property in Wisconsin and there was water leaking through. It was a 3-story house. Oh. The water was leaking from the top floor down to the basement. This property was on market for a very long time. came in, had to do mold remediation, and this whole crazy process. So it's a very expensive situation when you're dealing with water. Now, one thing that I think people can do is when they're managing from afar, like that scenario, is you almost have to hire a consultant or a project manager, typically called, to go and vet and make sure that the management company is doing what they're doing. It's kind of like a middle management that works directly for you to keep them accountable. Yeah. Right? It's like, but it's an additional expense that people don't want to pay, but there is value in that, particularly when you're an absentee owner. Right. I had a gentleman go into one of my properties, a roofer in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and tell me, oh my God, the whole ceiling is leaking. You got water dripping down to the floor. I sent my mom over there because she lives in Wisconsin still. And she looked at it. She said, there's nothing wrong with this property. This guy literally tried to scam me like $20,000, $30,000. Yeah. I'm like, you're out of your damn mind. Yeah. So like this does happen. And I think a lot of people really forget that management is so important in a property, particularly after you acquire it, because it drives value. Yeah. Like how you increase the value of a property outside of forced appreciation or just appreciation in general is by managing it. Yeah. You have to get rents increased. You have to decrease expenses. Those are your two solutions. Yep. Right? So it's like that partnership is incredibly important. And I think a lot of people look over it, but like a lot of people also expect to just purchase a property and it's going to magically like generate all this value, which can happen based on the market. But you can also go in, kick all the tenants out, get new tenants in, raise rent 300 without fixing anything. Yep. Just based on because those market value, just because those tenants have been in there for 20 years. Correct. Like it is totally reasonable to go kick tenants out, not fix anything, and increase rents.
That was my story with the fourplex. I bought it, and the rents during that time where people were paying like $1,050, you know, not paying for water. Mind you, I paid the water. They had independent electric. And the properties were in good condition. Outside of their way of living, the property itself was in good condition. What I did is I just started to wait, year by year and increasing the rent. Some of them were okay with it because they really, really were under market value. Some of them didn't. So, I just let them go, and I was able to, during that time, go in and update them somewhat. One of the things that I definitely wanted to do was update the bathrooms. So I've been doing that every time somebody leaves. And I can tell you now the properties have gone from, the rent have gone from $1,000 to $1,600.
Exactly.
That's like one unit times four. Yeah.
$2,400 a month. Extra cash flow.
Exactly.
Based on a 7% cap rate or whatever the cap rate. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Exactly.
So it's the same process for every property, which is awesome. And like getting in there and doing that is great. I had a girl in one of my properties, and a lot of people don't realize this either. You can hire a service to like kick tenants out. It's called an eviction service, and it is so cheap. Like it's like $800 or something. Yep. So I had a girl, and she basically fraudulated documents and said that she was somebody she wasn't. I got her into the property. She paid rent for 2 months, and then all of a sudden stops paying rent. She missed like 3 months. I'm like, okay, you're gone. And me being down here while working with it up there, it was a little bit difficult. So I picked up the phone, called some eviction services, and they went to court. They did all these things for me, and it was so cheap. Like it was like $800, like I said, and it's like many people think that this is a long, drawn-out process that you have to do. Yep. No, hire it, put it out there, get somebody else to take care of it. Now, after she gets evicted, they go change the locks, right? All of her belongings are still in the property. Technically, it's my property because she's gone and she left it in there, whatever. She breaks the window, gets in, unlocks the door, takes all of her stuff out, and steals my washer and dryer. I'm like, okay. Now, granted, yes, I'm out 3 months rent, so let's call it, $9,000. So let's say I'm in like $12,000 on this like whole eviction process, lost rent, everything, right? All right, cool. I don't even care because what happened is the property, I got it for such a good deal that in the year or whatever that I lost $12,000 with her, it's still appreciated by $75,000. So now, okay, 75 minus 12, let's call it 15. You're looking at a $60,000 profit still. Now, yes, you do have to have the cash on hand, and you do have to have the cash flow to be able to support that loss. And a lot of people getting started don't necessarily have that. That's why your first couple properties are so hard. But when you have properties like we have that are going to cover that vacancy, it doesn't even matter. Like, who cares? Like, How are you going to let one little bad apple like that ruin everything? Like, you have to have resiliency and like be able to push through that, because how a lot of people get successful is by dealing with stress that would crumble others.
Correct. I absolutely agree. It's a long-term game. It is not a short-term get quick, rich quick game. If you're able to stand, like some of the stresses that come, which I think are more minimal than whatnot, especially if you're just dealing with like single families or smaller units, right? Definitely is worth the money. Once you obviously scale into other, multifamilies, definitely if you're scaling into like 50 plus unit multifamilies, you're definitely going to want to get more involved with property management. And the stress then is going to be picking the right property manager. You won't deal with the direct complaints, but you will want to stay on top of your property managers. So
a lot of times, sorry to interject, but a lot of times people that get to that level hire an asset manager. It's called an asset manager to overlook the property manager. Another mid-level position that is adding expense, but it's way worth it.
Yeah, and it depends also on how involved you want to be, right? If you want to be just literally a passive investor where you're just putting your money, right? And then you're going to, like you said, hire that asset manager to deal with all that, that's perfectly fine. If you want to be more of an involved, investor and you want to be that asset manager, you can do that as well. All comes down to, your level of involvement that you want to have on that property. And also where your life is. I usually deal with clients that, have a pretty amazing job. They earn really well, so they don't want to be doing that, work of being super involved. So they just delegate it, right? But then they have sometimes their wives that, are at home, and, they're not, actively working and they want to assume that role. So that's fine. You can actually leverage that help, because it's not something that is going to be a daily job, it will come as it comes. So I think that's definitely something that you can manage depending on where your life is.
100%. That's an interesting point. I do think a lot of significant others, whether it be male or female, do end up taking on that role while the main breadwinner is out doing their thing. Because a lot of people think, oh, I want to get into real estate. I have to get my real estate license and I have to make it this whole big active thing. Yeah. But if you're making 200, 300 in your day job, just shut up and keep doing that while you let us kind of take on the investment part of this as kind of like an acquisition manager, if you want to call it. And then I also wanted to talk about when you get to those bigger amount of units, a lot of people, like let's say I purchased a 20 unit building, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to go live in that unit. I'm going to, not for an extended, like I'm going to go test the waters, right? When you start, every property has something wrong with it.
Yep.
Every single one. I always call myself an investigator, and you're basically trying to find what's wrong with it. The perfect property on the ocean or whatever your ideal of perfect property is, it will have something wrong. Yeah. It's your job to expose that and find it out. So by going and living or staying in these properties, maybe it be for a week or 2 weeks, you're going to start figuring out how things run around the property, your different tenants, who's a problem tenant, who's not a problem tenant. You can find out who you can hire to give you inside information on all the other tenants and maybe give them a rental discount. But that's very important.
That works very well.
So
having the one person in the building
that runs it
or can tell you what is going on when you're not there and you can give them a discount is totally worth it.
100%.
100% worth it.
And they can honestly talk other tenants off of a ledge, or they can reduce a lot of the problems before it gets to you to kind of keep you in more of that passive role. And I know that works extremely well. I have a 3 unit, and it's only 3 units. It's not that big of a deal, but there's one guy fixes everything, tells me what's wrong with keeps everybody sane. And I love this guy.
Yeah. One of the things that came to mind earlier, because a lot of people are trying to get in this game and I've seen that they gotten burned. I personally actually did too. This whole wave with Airbnb properties, and you wanted to get a property to Airbnb it and then, make all this amount of money, right? Sometimes I see people that want to jump into that game, but they don't know how, I don't want to say difficult, but intense it is to manage
the management, the
property,
cleaning, the VRBO, the Airbnb, the restrictions.
Exactly, the restrictions to the restrictions. 3, does it even make sense for the amount of work that you're going to put in?
No, it doesn't. How much are management companies taking on that? 30%, 40% of revenue?
Yeah,
It's stupid.
at least to the lowest 20%.
I make a lot of YouTube videos about don't buy Airbnb properties. It's way too volatile, and it creates more of an active investment process than the passive monthly.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen people do really good money. I actually do have one property in Sarasota that is currently active. It used to be long-term tenantship, and then I went into the Airbnb, and just because of the location, which is very important. Some people think that you can just buy a property and just put it in Airbnb and anything. It's like, no, like you have to think where these people are trying to stay for Airbnb. It has to be an area that makes sense. You know, I actually had one of my duplexes. I tried this. I tried to do one of the units as an Airbnb property, and I quickly realized, furnished it, you know, basic, nicely. It was, you know, it looked pretty. But I quickly realized that the people that were staying there weren't the type of people that I wanted. Two, when I did the math on an annual basis, it was not making sense for the amount of effort that I needed to put in, you know, to manage it. So I quickly flipped it, right? But I think the important thing there is that whenever you buy any type of property, you can't be doing your numbers based on Airbnb numbers, you know, unless those numbers are, you know, you do it super conservatively, right? And they make sense even on a conservative approach, right? But usually the long-term tenantship is numbers are the ones that you should be looking at that sustain your property. You know, should that not rent as you should?
So one thing that I typically see is like a lot of people say this. I've seen it. Real estate is a get rich for sure scheme long term. It's not an operating business that's like actively like throwing in hundreds of thousands of dollars for you. And the interesting take on Airbnb is I feel like it's taking that long-term investment, all the basis of real estate as a good investment tool, and trying to swap it to operating a business. Like how I look at that is like, why wouldn't you just go build a different business? Like, I don't know, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of people that are going to give me pushback. There's a lot of people that have only Airbnb portfolios. Maybe it's in like the Wyoming mountains or whatever the case may be. But when you talk about location like that, that makes total sense. For me, I just don't see the value of changing and trying to swap this whole long-term get rich 100% thesis in real estate to a operating business.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I personally agree. I'm sure there's people that have been extremely successful, and I think the success have come from having multiple, which is just like basically
mitigation of risk.
Right, exactly. Mitigation of risk, exactly what we just talked about on the long-term tenantship. The more, the better.
100%.
So that's where their profits come from, having just multiple of them. But if you're just, you know, the one investor starting out and you want to test it, I don't think it's the best way to get started.
How do you suggest people get started in this real estate game with such a high level of entry cost to get in? 3% down on a $500,000. Let's just call it a single family, because I don't know. Duplexes, I think, start at like 700.
600. Well, depending on where you are. Like I just closed one at 575 in Fort Lauderdale. Beautiful, renovated.
So 600. Great. Let's call it 600 start for a duplex. Yeah. Okay. So now 3% down on that. Was it like a 20%, 3%, 5%?
3.5%. I think his closing total was 46.
Okay. 5? So let's say 45,000 to get in, right? It's like, damn, like people can't even figure out how to get started. And one really big factor affecting self-starters right now is the condo crisis, right? Yes. Like I would not suggest going and buying a condo right now, because 2025 budgets are about to roll out and you're going to get murdered.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, people are waiting for this to kind of wrap up. I think we're going to see a massive surge of condos on the back end, because that's all that people can afford. You can get a reasonable one-bedroom condo for, I don't know, 400,000.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right. But what do you suggest that these self-starters do right now besides wait for the condo crisis to settle down?
I mean, it really depends on where you want to invest, right? If you're just solely trying to invest in something where you can, you know, pay that 3.5%, maybe live for a year, you know, I would think, what is your intention with this? Like, is your intention to start building portfolios? Then you might need to sacrifice your location of where you are, you know. And I have that conversation with a lot of my buyers.
Wait, you said sacrificing location.
Yeah, I mean,
good luck. People's egos are way too big.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why I literally sit down with people and I'm like, okay, look, let's have a hard conversation. What is the most important thing for you guys? Is it like, you know, building wealth through real estate slowly through increasing your portfolio, or, you know, showing up the house of where you are to your friends, and, you know, because that's going to change a lot of the dynamics. Because if I can help you find that property that might not be exactly in the location that you like, it's not a bad location, but it's a location that it's, good for rents. You can stay there for the next year and a half, right? And you can, hopefully do some work to the property if it needs it, right? And then help you get started in that manner, then I think it's totally worth it. Like, it will help you get started in real estate. Just because the location is what kills a lot of people. They have this idea of having their dream home in this particular
Quartz
place.
countertops, white cabinets, super modern, this, that.
They focus on the things that are controllable, like, and the things that are not, those are the things that you need to focus on, especially if you're trying to grow for the long term.
I always run the numbers on an hour to and from work or your like location every day. 2 hours a day times 5 days a week is 10 hours a week in the car.
Yeah.
Times 52 weeks a year. So 52 times 10, so 520 hours divided by 24. How many days is that? I can't do the math in my head, but you're spending so much time in the car every single day when you buy a property in the wrong location. But people would rather buy a property in the wrong location because it looks nice.
Right.
Yet they're getting crushed by the traffic.
Right.
Like, such a stupid thing. It drives me absolutely bonkers.
Right.
So what?
Or they're looking to buy a specific type of house, like they're wanting to buy, And again, look, this is what I usually say to people. There's different types of investors. There's different types of investments for different people, right? So I'll tell you an example. I work with international clients as well. For them, they rather buy pre-construction because the property is new. They don't have to think about all the things that they have to do.
Recertification or maintenance.
Correct.
Or
They're just, their idea of investing has to do with holding their stability, holding their wealth, preservation of wealth, basically,
yes. And that brings, 100%. And
yeah, so like someone saying, like the investor type is going to be different for everyone, right? So in their cases, that might make sense to have the newer property, right? For somebody,
the returns are going to be not as good because it's a newer property, but they're okay with making that sacrifice because that's where they're at. That's what fits their portfolio and their needs.
Correct, exactly. They're going to be more, relaxed about not having all these issues. They don't want to put money up front. They rather just, basically pay it at the closing, be in cash, be in finance, whichever it is, right? They just rather have it that way.
100%. And all the time people ask me, they go, Alec, what do you think about this? And I'm like, dude, you're telling me to answer with no information or knowledge on your background, who you are, what your goals are. Like, do you want to invest for tax saving purposes? Do you want to invest for cash flow? Do you want to invest for appreciation? Like, and typically, this brings up another good point. So there's that. We have to know more about them to give them the correct advice.
Absolutely.
And they just expect us to rattle it off. Like, it's good, it's bad.
Yeah, that's why it's the better realtor will ask you good questions 100%. To try to understand where you are at,
And then they don't want to open up because they don't want to share that info because they're not that serious or whatever the case is. It's this vicious cycle of
And it's fine because I usually tell them, look, if you don't share with me, I'll show you what my best idea is, but I could be holding a gem from you.
100%.
And that's fine if you want to go like that, but I usually see that happens. They start opening up. Like, if I tell them, if it's an international client, they don't tell me exactly how much they want to invest. I'm like, okay, I can show you property of, I don't know, like $500,000 and you might not like it. 100%. And then little by little it's saying, oh no, but like that doesn't look as nice. I'm like, okay, well then you didn't tell me what's your budget, 100%. That's what I need to know.
I think one thing that's important too is, this might not be so much for international buyers, but this might be for local buyers, is you typically have 3 locations in your life that you go to all the time. One is your home, one is your work, and the other is like a grocery store or like a spot for entertainment, like when you just want to like chill and get that like vibe or whatever. And today with groceries, you can order your groceries, so that's kind of dissipating. But like what I always say is, those 3 points, you're going to have to figure out your travel and all those things, and you should be able to kind of conglomerate it and keep it at least to a decent time spent between all those things. So I think that is so interesting because people are like, oh, this, oh, that. And I'm like, just figure out, where do you go most? Do you drop your kids off at school every day? Okay. Where's your work? Okay. Where's your grocery store? Where do you like to shop? And then through that, you can kind of paint a good picture for them. And even if it's an investment property, that might be more for a single family or primary residence. But even if it's an investment property, all right, let's talk about this. Now, when I was in Wisconsin, there was a neighborhood that I was attacking, right? Attacking it, trying to buy the whole damn neighborhood. right?
Love it.
So what happens is once you start owning a couple properties, this is savage. So what happens when you start owning a couple properties in the same neighborhood, you start creating comparables for yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So I had 3 properties in this neighborhood. First one rented out for $2,800. So the next person comes around to buy another property. I show them that I rented this. I'm like, hey, look, this comparable. I rented it out for $2,800. You're going to pay me $3,000. They're like, okay. The next one I bought, $3,200, because I showed them, hey, this one rented for $28,000. Hey, this one rented for $3,000. You're paying me $32,000. So it's like when you start conglomerating properties like that, that's a whole nother different ball game. You start dominating a market and creating comparables off yourself, and you are chilling.
No, or even when you start like you said, buying one property, you buy the next one, you can change the whole look of the neighborhood.
100%.
I had an investor that actually wanted to invest in an area down in Homestead that it looked rough, but he was like, if I can get 3 of those multifamilies, smaller multifamilies, I'm changing that whole street.
100%.
And they're going to have to, the other ones are going to have to sell, somewhat because, they're being basically pushed out,
And then what you do is you go market to the properties that aren't as nice as yours, steal their tenants because they've been in the area for this whole time. And maybe you go knock on the door or hire a realtor or whatever. And you bring them over and upcharge them, and they're willing to pay because they have been living in the slums for such a long time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So at scale, this whole real estate thing, particularly if you're centralized in one location, has massive benefits.
Absolutely.
Massive benefits.
Absolutely. Once you get out of your own head on, what it looks like, what it looks to have a single family home, if let's say is your first residence, or what it looks to have a deal, like everybody wants a deal, but it's like, I don't think you're ready for a deal, because if you were ready for a deal, then, you will be jumping on it, right? A lot of people have that misconception of what a deal looks like, and a deal might be different for you, it might be different for me, right?
What does a deal look like for you?
What does a deal look like for me today? I'm definitely focused on anything multifamily over 10 units.
Multifamily over 10.
Yeah, that's what I'm focusing on, and
deeper.
Yes. So
what do you mean by that?
Well,
like you see 3 10-unit buildings, right? All 3, whatever. What is it for you? Is it that it's move-in ready and you don't have to put much work in? Is it, I guess you kind of already touched on that.
Well, no, for me it will be Class B.
Okay.
It will be something that I can add value to, lower rents, so that I can add value to and then increase the rents. And great location that I see around that it's going to be, developing. I can visually see that there's things that are happening, and you can see that, like, if you start getting familiar with the different areas. I've been here in Miami for 10 years, and I love driving, right? My primary area is downtown, Midtown, Brickell, all those areas. I can already see what happened there, but even if I go a little bit more north, like Miami Shores, North Miami Beach, all those areas there, I can see what's happening, and I can actually, for somebody that's just looking for, let's say, not a condo, but like a single family home, I can let them know, hey, this is what's happening around. You might want to invest right now because the landscape of the neighborhood is changing, right?
100%.
What you thought before was like, oh, this neighborhood's too ghetto, it's too low class. Hey, people are moving. They're being pushed up. So 100%. That neighborhood is going to completely change now.
I hear that a lot, and I don't work in that area too much. I feel like there's a big divide in Miami. It's south of the river and north of the river. Mm-hmm. Like for me, for example, the commute, the time in the car, all that stuff to get up there north there, I'm out. Ain't no way it happening. So it's interesting that you bring that up because, like, I'm Gables, Grove, Brickell, Pinecrest. Like, I call it the triangle of love there. It's like, if you're in here, you're comfortable. Now up there, I'm hearing a lot of people more and more talk about those particular areas and the vast amount of opportunity up there.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I love Coral Gables. It's always been a very well-established neighborhood. I love Coconut Grove, I personally live in Edgewater, so that's why, around...
Which street are you on?
I'm in 19th Street. I'm right in front of the Margaret Pace Park.
No, that's beautiful. I just sold a unit at 1800 Club, and I have a bunch of friends that live in that building. I used to live on 24th when I first moved down to Miami.
Okay, yeah.
Modera. Hated it. The reason being, so we were backed up to the common space on the top floor, so our room was like penthouse something. It was 9 floors up. So when people would mail me, they'd be like, "Oh, like you live in a penthouse." I was like, "Nah, it's a rental first and foremost. Second, it's 9 stories tall." On the other side of that, we were backed up to the common space. So The unit was probably the most turned over unit in the building, right?
Whoa.
So they can see the data. When you're a big company like that, you run data on how often property vacates. And I would assume that this one probably turned over every year, because every time somebody slid the chairs, you would hear up against my back wall. And me as management, I'm like, God damn, y'all think that, like, this goes back to having a good manager. Like, y'all should know something is wrong with this. Someone go sleep in there for 2 nights and you'll hear exactly what's wrong with it, everything. And then you can reduce or mitigate that turnover. All they had to do was put rubber things on the bottom of the freaking chairs and move the desk to the other side of the wall, and it would have been a way better unit. Like, figure it out, buddy. You know what I mean? I told this to the manager because I came close with him. Became good friends with him at the front desk, but stuff like that could really make or break an experience and just add so much revenue. Every time a unit turns over, painting, all this, all that, you're in, I don't know, $1,000. It's like,
crazy. Talk about, like, when it's time to, like, let go of a tenant. Like, you might want to keep a tenant if the rents are somewhat fair, right, to the market, and just either increase it very small, quantities per year,
minimum like $50 per year,
$50, like something like that, because you don't want to lose that tenant and have to go through the whole process of paying a realtor to list it, to get it rented, to get it ready.
I always say you have to train the tenant for increases every year, no matter what, because if they're in there 3-4 years, 4 years is $50 a year is $200, like, change over time. So like, you have to train the tenant for increases no matter what. Yeah. That's like a bare minimum, I think, that a lot of people have to put into place.
I waited, especially with condos, because right now condos are going through a lot of stuff, like pools being closed, amenity areas going through renovation. So it's like, tenants that are in a condo environment, they want to pay also for their amenities, right?
Sure.
Otherwise, they're going to jump and go,
to another
condo, being so many right now available. So you kind of have to weigh that out depending on where your building is.
That's its own market. Like, the condo market is its own separate like, situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very different to deal with a tenant that is on a single family home, ongoing. So I totally agree with that. But yeah, so the landscape is changing. Every single neighborhood in Miami, it is absolutely changing, because we are seeing you're a prime example. You came from somewhere else. We're seeing such a big migration of people coming to Miami, South Florida.
Can't wait till the Citadel building's done.
There you go.
So people tell me my house is going to go up $1 million once that's built.
People tell me, like, oh, but Miami has probably reached the top. I'm like, people haven't even moved to this building.
We're the youngest, like, big city ever, too.
They haven't moved. Like, all these offices that are going to be built up, like, their hedge fund executives have not moved yet. Imagine when they move with their families,
Coral Gables, Coconut Grove, Pinecrest, Miami Shores.
Everything, right? Those cities that are the closest to, those districts that are closest to the downtown area, which is where the financial sector is going to be, they're going to be increasing value so much, So that's why I tell people, like, if you're thinking about living in any of those areas, you have to buy now.
Or you're screwed. Or you're never going to be able to afford it.
Or you're not going to be able to afford it.
So the crazy story about this house is, all right, I remember. So my last house, $710,000. Let's dive back into the sacrificing. So this property, 6571 Southwest 28th Street. So 28th Street, right on 67th. So there's 57th, which is the end of Coral Gables, and then 67th is 10 over, but a main street. And it's getting to the point where it's like nobody speaks English, and I couldn't really connect with my neighbors, right? So it was super frustrating, me trying to connect with them. I didn't feel at home. I almost moved because it was just such a process. But, like, that is the perfect example of sacrificing to get where you want to be.
Such a great story. Yes.
It was one street, or it was one house in from 67th. And I'm talking, like, people with loud exhausts every night. Yum, yum, yum. My neighbors on the left side would have parties in the middle of the week. I don't know what they did for work, but it was like, I don't know, maybe like a group of 6 people, and they would play, like, loud music right outside my window. I called the cops on them probably 20 times in a row, won that battle. They stopped having parties, right? The other side of me, he had a parrot, right? The parrot was so loud. I didn't have impact windows in the house. He kept it outside, wasn't inside. And every night, the wife had, like, some sort of disability of some sort. So she would go and like talk to this parrot. And like the parrot was just rah, 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 rah. One bedroom on that side. Couldn't use the right half of the house. So annoying. But so I have the street, I have the neighbors doing parties, and then I have this parrot. Misery. And nobody speaks English. Misery. Misery.
Letting America to its finest.
So I'm like sitting here trying to sell this house. First we listed it for 1.1 million. And this was right when interest rates were starting to climb. Like they were like literally like it was like the Fed is raising rates. The Fed is raising rates. I'm like shit. Like we're going against this. But it is what it is. So listed at 1.1, dropped it down to 999, and then I was like, okay, I'm just bottoming out. Like I'm walking away with 100,000. So listed at 900. Sat on market. It took a year on market. Sold it. And I knew from the bottom of my heart, if I did not get into Coral Gables at that very moment, never getting into Coral Gables. I just sent all my neighbors a text here. There's not one house on market in the 2 millions. Not one. There's 1.45, 1.95. The 1.45 is a dump. No pool, tiny yard. The 1.95, historic. Can't do anything to it. It's been on market for 3 years. This house I bought for 2.2 million. 100,000 over appraisal. Nightmare, right? Sucks. Okay, it's not worth that. Whatever. I paid it. Knew it was going to be worth it. And today, not one house for $2 million.
Yeah. No, I know. It's just a waiting game. It is just a waiting game. And if you can, sacrifice, the amount and see the future, then that's really where we're talking about deals, right? You have to think about it like that, especially if you're trying to buy for location.
And now let me dive back into this real quick because I just had this thought. Mm-hmm. When I lived in that house, I did not want to have anybody over. I barely had any furniture because I knew it wasn't going to be my forever home. I sacrificed. I held out. And I knew, like I have a party every month here, right? Okay. I love having people here. I did not want to have people there because it was a dump in my mind. Still a beautiful house. It was built in 2001. That was the only thing it had going for it. Slab, like 2001 construction down here is very new for that neighborhood. So like that whole time I'm like, man, I just want to have people over. I want to live in a comfortable spot. I want to be able to like enjoy this house and my life and all these things. But I knew where I was going. So basically my point is when people get out of kind of this thought process of having to have everything nice and not sacrificing, if I let my ego get in the way, I never would have walked away with $100 and some $1,000 and been able to purchase in Gables. So like when you can delay that gratification, you're like chilling. But people got to get over their damn ego.
Yep, absolutely. And that's with anything, right? Like I think we're living in an age now that everything you want instant gratification on anything. And if you are able to delay that, and actually do the sacrifice, for whatever investment you want to do at the time, you'll be on top. You'll see, the gains, when you just wait it out a little bit, And especially like I have a heart for a lot of, locals, here in Miami. I have a lot of friends that are locals and, they're just getting started with life in the sense of, getting married and all this stuff. And they're like, we want to stay here, but we don't know where to go. Everything is so expensive, And I usually have that conversation like, hey, you might have dreamed to start with a single family home in a very nice neighborhood. You're going to have to readjust that, and that's okay. I'm like, if your main goal is to stay in Miami, if that is truly, truly your goal, everything else you'll be able to sacrifice. You might need to switch from starting with a single family to a duplex, which I think it's the best investment anyway for you, So that's usually how you should see it, right? And little by little, you start scaling and you will be able to get to that dream house that you want. Like that is legit, Right now, I usually say I'm extremely blessed. When I first got into real estate, it was because of a need. During that time, back in 2009, my parents were losing their home because of the crash. So my aunt, I remember, told me, hey, you should buy a house, use your credit, to be able to have another house because they were losing that one, right? And I was like, no, why? I'm like 20. Like, why would I do this? You know, like I have my whole life ahead of me. And truthfully, like if it wouldn't have been for her, like just pushing and pushing during the time I had really great credit, there were so many good programs that they were incentivizing people to buy, you know, even giving them like down payments, assistance and all this stuff.
If real estate didn't exist, the banks wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
We keep the banks afloat because real estate is the number one product that humans buy that banks take big or give big loans on.
Absolutely.
They incentivize the purchase of real estate via that way or through depreciation, tax incentives. They have to give benefits to that because it keeps the banks afloat.
Yeah,
If people realize that, they would realize how, and what we learned from 2008. If people realized how dependent banks are on real estate and how they corrected what we learned in 2008, you would realize that it's like it's nearly freaking impossible to like lose on real estate.
And when there is opportunity, right? Because during that time at my age, I saw like, why would I even do this right now? You know, like I don't want to get into this debt. But that was the best opportunity that I see then, you know. So somebody encouraged me to really make it happen, you know, and I'm so happy that I did then, right? And I used programs during that time that helped me, right? Now, you will have people, and this is one of my pet peeves, you know, that will say like, oh, but that program is not advantageous because, you know, all these like fees and all this, and, you know, at the end they end up charging you in the back. And I'm like, look, do you have $40,000 today? Are you going to be able to save $40,000 in the next year? Yes or no? Okay. You need that money.
100%.
Because another year delaying you,
the house is going to be $150,000
the house is going to
more.
be $150,000 more.
People don't realize that they have to out earn the market.
Yeah.
Like it's not just like you're going to, when you start saving money, if you don't increase the rate at which you're saving on top of which the market is appreciating, every $10,000 on a loan is a $50 a month payment, right? So if you have $100,000 in appreciation, meaning you have to buy a property for $100,000 more than what you could have last year, you're spending $500 more per month on that payment.
Absolutely.
So your earning potential it's going to stay what it is, but it also has to supersede that increase in payment.
Right. So that's why you have to be very honest with yourself. One, are you going to be having a huge increase in salary in the next year? Yes or no? You would only know that, right? Two.
And most of the chances is no.
No.
You're not.
Right? You're not. Because I tell clients, like, you want to stay in Miami, you have two options. You either buy now or you start working in increasing your income substantially.
I don't even know, but this is a very interesting stat to dive into. What is the average salary increase on a year-to-year date? I don't know. If it's 10% and you're at 100,000, that's 10,000 a year. That's still barely moving the needle.
Yeah.
And I feel like 10% raise is like insane.
No, I don't even think it's that. But
exactly, that's what I mean. So like unless you're getting that 10%, like you're out of your damn mind.
And
you ain't buying ever.
And that also depends on, you know, what type of job you are, you know, like what's your industry and all that stuff, right? Yeah, no, I don't know, but whatever that is, like you just have to be very honest with yourself, you know, where you are in life. Really, if your goal is to stay here, you know, you might need to either switch that job, start that business, you know, get into an industry that maybe pays you more, whatever that is, you know, there is a solution, I definitely think, for everything. Sometimes you won't have the job, so you will need to sacrifice that location, and that is the solution, you know. So you just have to be honest with yourself so that you don't create this frustration, you know, and fantasy that there is no option for you.
100%.
Because there is options.
I had a female text me, so I've been working with her for like 2 years on finding a place. She sold something overseas in France and then is renting something here. And she's like, Alec, I need to get into something. So I've been sending her stuff. And I'm like, listen, if you don't buy now, you're screwed.
Yeah.
And it came to the point, this was 2 years ago. I just sent her something like maybe 2 or 3 months ago. And she's now like, I've lost all hope. And I'm like, well, I told you. You just think I'm lying to just lie? Like, what do you mean? Yeah. So that was a little bit of frustrating to see because there are people that are just like completely fried and like they've lost all hope.
Yeah. No, and you know, I mean, we're still realtors and we definitely have a heart for people. But I like to speak to people that are not delusional. In that sense, you know, like I can understand when there's lack of information, you know, because then you need to get educated, right? But when you're just like in a state of, you know, lack, because you can literally live in a state of lack. Like nothing is ever going to be good enough. You won't live in abundance, right? But when you're in the state of abundance, you will see that, okay, I can get this and I can transform it into this and then I can grow into this. And you're just kind of growing through the process, But when you live in a state of lack, everything's going to be an issue. Everything's going to be a problem. Something's not going to be enough. Example that you just gave, you've been telling this person day in and day out, there is no crash coming. These are the stats. We're talking numbers here. This is the reality. And now she lost all hope.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the push and pushing people to kind of take that leap. Some people are like, hey, no, my debt to income ratio shouldn't be above 30 or 35% or whatever the case may be, right? And one thing that I've noticed with myself is when I stretch myself into purchasing a property, like if you get a realtor that's like, no, this is a great deal, you should buy it. But that person is like, oh, I don't know if I can make the numbers work. Like, I don't know, I'm going to be house poor, all this stuff. First and foremost, let's unravel this. The bank is only going to approve you if they know you can pay that back.
Correct.
Because they want their money back.
Correct.
They're in the business of risk, right? The more risky a loan is, the higher the interest rate. So yes, your interest rate might be a little bit higher, but they know that you're going to be able to pay that back.
Absolutely.
So when there's a realtor that says this is a great deal and you are qualified to purchase it, but you're still worried, I think this brings up an interesting point. I've had clients where I've pushed through and said, no, this is going to be okay. This is going to be the best investment you've ever made. I know you're going to be tight, but as you take these leaps, your income potential and your earnings increase because you're forced to. It puts your back against the wall and you somehow magically come up with all this extra money and you start earning more money because you're looking for other opportunities. And now you have this property, which you can plant your flag in and say, hey, I'm proud of this. I'm going to keep this. I'm going to make this work. I've had a lot of people like, Alec, thank you so much for pushing me to do this. Like without you, I wouldn't not have done this. I was scared. I wasn't sure of myself. But then on the reverse side, I've had people not take that leap of faith. And then they're sitting on the sidelines, like just completely frustrated. Like, dang, I should have purchased 2 years ago when you said. So have you had any experience with either or? Have you pushed yourself? With this house, I pushed myself 100%, like big monthly payment, but like it always pays off for me. And that's one common thing I've seen for every property I've purchased.
I've been scared to buy every time a property.
Thank you.
Okay. Every single time I had a feeling of, being fearful. But I also knew that based on my track record, that everything is going to be okay.
It always works out.
It always works out, So every single time that I go through the process also with the banks, with the numbers, like, can I afford this? Will it rent? Will it not rent? Right? Every single time things turn out fine. I don't know if I've been blessed or favored or something, but I have had very little problems with my tenants. There's stories with every tenant. There's always going to be, there's a risk to anything. But really has been minimal to what I've had to really see the value on the increases on my properties. So absolutely, like even a person that's buying something for their own to live, you have to definitely see that things are going to be okay, especially in a market like Florida that we have seen now. There's so many good things coming to it. If we were in another market that we're seeing people fleeing the state for specific reasons, then I would understand that there's some things that economically, right, that are happening. But when you start, working with a good realtor that can tell you what is happening really in your community, what is happening in your city, what is happening around the state. And
a good realtor owns property in the markets that they're selling.
Thank you.
If you're using a realtor that does not also invest, you're out of your damn mind.
Yes. I agree. I have pushback on that, but I agree because they can actually talk from conviction. They have experience. They have gone through the process. They can relate to the feeling of, exactly what you shared, being fearful.
This house, for example, what I can tell you about Coral Gables, when I was not in this market, for example, there were certain things that I don't know. Now I know that roof rats. You know what roof rats are? Mm-hmm. All right, Coral Gables has a lot of them, okay? Oh. Now, because the previous owner was as old as he wasn't up on the roof. First thing I did when I found out I had roof rats, I get up on the roof and I start investigating. Yeah. There's a hole in the soffit. Yeah. Guess what I do? Hire a roofer to come put up metal so that the roof rats can no longer get in there.
Right.
So when I go and sell a property around here, or somebody's looking to purchase in Coral Gables, I can tell them, hey, you're probably going to have roof rats.
Yeah.
How do you mitigate it? Oh, super easy. No problem. Like there's like stuff like that.
Yeah.
Then you got this house is on a what's it called? Crawl space, right? You have issues with crawl space. This crawl space is from 1945. Are there soft spots? Yes. Does it matter? Not really. Can you fix it? Yes. But like there's so many different things and experiences that you can share once you've already been through it.
Yep. Yeah. And then like things even like, I live right in front of the park, and a lot of clients, like when they want to buy condos, especially if they're not from Miami or even Florida, they have the whole question with the hurricanes, like how safe this is, how about the windows, are they really impact, And I'm like, look, I've been here in Florida for 10 years. No, sorry, in Miami for 10 years, in Florida for 22 years. I lived both in a single family home. I lived both in an apartment. I'm here. And I'm fine.
I'm alive.
I'm alive and it's great, It's going to be okay. I'm not saying that disasters cannot happen. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, you should definitely insure your house and try to have all these preventive measures, especially if there's a hurricane coming our way. A lot of things need to be happening to prevent. But look, it hasn't prevented me from living life, making investments that have been very, profitable. And it won't keep me from continue to investing, into properties. And I can guarantee you that if you are, savvy and you definitely go into real estate for investment long term, like you will do good. All these bigger corporations are coming into Florida, and they themselves are doing it. So what makes you think that you little person cannot do this? You can,
100%. So one thing that my buddy said about Margaret Pace Park is if you're too low on the floors, you hear all the cars. Like people will go drive by there and rev their cars. Mm-hmm. And then he said the dog park smells like pee a little bit. And then I'm trying to think of what else. But basically where I'm going with this is like you have to have somebody that knows those things.
Yeah.
If you go buy an SLS Lux, you're going to hear sugar.
Yeah.
And you're going to pay $1.5 million for a condo that's right face to sugar. And you're boom, 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 boom every night at 2 a.m. when you're trying to sleep.
Exactly.
Right? It's like, okay, part of that does have to do with living in such an area like Brickell.
Like Brickell, yeah.
But the little nuances like that
are
what really separates experiences from thoughts or like opinions and kind of puts you in a whole nother level or ball game.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah, I think really there's opportunity for anything. That's why I usually say, understand who are you and what do you need today. It's going to look very different if you're trying to buy your first home than if you're trying to go in it like it is my first home, but it is an investment. Like it's going to look very different. And if you get, honest on that, it's just going to make your life easier through the process. It's going to make the life easier for the realtor because they're going to know exactly what's going to make sense for that type of purchase, And on top of that also, it's going to help you build through the process, and be able to get that education that you need in order to make it better for the next one.
100%. I think a lot of people kind of hide behind education and they aren't willing to put in the time, effort, and energy taken to understand real estate as a whole too, right? Which is interesting because you and I have probably we have put countless hours. And the reason I know this is because I've done it, right? So when I meet somebody that's a realtor, I can understand how much time they put into their education based on how they talk, their experiences, what they've done, etc. When I first got started in real estate, I would spend freaking 8 hours a day grinding YouTube videos trying to learn absolutely everything, right? So sometimes I think it comes down to people taking time out of their day to like put effort and energy into learning something so that they can better make a decision, right? Because we get so many people that come in and they're like, if they haven't been in the market before or whatever the case may be, it's their first time, they just neglect to, and I'll even sit there and be like, hey, read this or send them a video, like watch this, and they just won't do it. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, don't you care or whatever? So it's like, it's interesting.
Yeah, but on the flip side of that, I'll tell you, like the internet is such a beautiful thing and it can be such a negative thing too, right?
This is true.
Like you can look at all the videos, you can, obviously as a realtor, you should definitely stay educated, right? But if you are like a buyer and you're learning about all these things from YouTube, you will find all types of information in YouTube. You know, some of them might be legit, some of them might not be legit. Some of them might be backed up with data. Some of them might not, you know.
Some people are posting stuff just for views.
Some of them are doing clickbait, right?
I make videos on YouTube sometimes that like is kind of goes against what I actually believe in my heart, because it's what the people want to see.
Right.
As unfortunate as it is, content is driven by viewership. Yeah. So y'all drive the content that we post, but and it might have nothing to do with any relevancy or any truth, but it hits the algo and the algo takes it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, like what I was going with that is that, you know, whatever you see, you know, definitely have enough information to ask realtors. I think that's good, because sometimes if you're a buyer that doesn't have any information, you don't even know what to ask. You know, so I actually like when clients ask me questions, because I'm like, I can see that they've done some of their homework, you know. And they're trying, and I like that. And I can guide them if there's something that is completely off, you know, and something that makes sense, you know. And that's with anything. There's just too much information that sometimes you have to learn, you know, what comes first, what comes second, you know, like people wanting to, for example, in accounting, right? Like, oh, should I buy my first home as an LLC? Should I not? I'm like, well, it depends, you know, like, what are you going to do with that house? It might not be right now the property that you want to do an LLC, you know, like just because somebody tells you have to doesn't mean that that is correct for you, you know?
100%. That brings up a lot of issues of down payment, right? Because it's like if they can only do 3%, they can't buy it in an LLC. If it's a single family, the bank's not going to give an LLC. So like there's so many nuances there.
That's why, yeah.
One thing that I do a lot with my clients when I'm walking through on the purchase is I ask questions on the phone in front of them, or in front of or if the other realtor's there, I'll ask questions that should be asked with the client there so they can hear me. That way they hear the response directly from the other agent as well. And I think that builds a lot of trust because they're looking at me to lead this process, right? They're looking at us like, hey, lead this. I don't know what questions to ask.
Right.
So when you ask those questions like that, it builds this rapport and it builds this trust, and like they really can tell that you have their best interest in mind.
Correct. No, and especially now in the current market, right? Now with like getting buyer representation, actually having like a buyer-broker agreement in place, you know, I really think that the people that are going to stay in real estate are going to be the ones who actually drive value, you know, and you need that, because otherwise you're just, you know, anybody can go online and just literally pick up the phone and call somebody to show a property, and that's it, you know, like, I mean, honestly, it doesn't take much outside of the, you know, the title part, right? But if you're trying to talk strategy, you know, what is better? What is your plan for the future? Where are you trying to go with all this? You want somebody that has done the homework, because they can really change, you know, the dynamic of how that purchase is going to go.
So one thing I always like to go back to is Elon Musk talking about Tesla, right? With this particular thing. Now, he has zero marketing budget. He just provides and produces a vehicle or a car that is so quality, and it provides so much value to the user that they go and purchase. And I think of us that way in real estate, is like, we don't have to worry about anything as long as we provide so much value. Yeah. So, and obviously social media is marketing and all that stuff, but like, it's interesting because it always comes back to like trust, and how you build trust is by providing value. So at the base level, 100%, I totally agree with that.
Value and building relationship for the longer term, you know, that will continue bringing back business, because people are going to trust you. That's really, you know, what it is, building relationships and trust.
I think one thing that's interesting to talk about too is like, there's so many realtors, right? Like if you go anywhere in the world in Miami or anywhere in Miami, there are so many realtors that it's insane. Now we forget as realtors that the licensing process is a business in and of itself. How many realtors are in Miami? Let's say, I don't know, 50,000?
Yeah, 69,000. That's her.
70,000. Okay. So 70,000 times $800 a year to renew your license. I don't even know the math on that. Yeah. Astronomical number. Yep. Plus you have continuing education, right? So then you have 70,000 people doing continuing education every 2 years. Massive amount of money, right? And I think when people don't know what they want to get into, they jump to real estate right away because it's this glam. You got Selling Sunset and all these different things, right? So that's why there are so many realtors. It's an easy thing to get into. The business of licensing is massively valuable. So that brings up an interesting point, I think, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think some people don't find, the respect for the profession because it is easy to get into this business and have uncapped potential for commissions. What other industry offers you that? I'm not sure.
Sure.
You just pay for your class, $250 or something, and then pay for your license every year, $800 for systems, and there you go. So the access of entry is very, very cheap, So a lot of people want to go in it, but a lot of people also don't do it full time because they don't know what it takes to really drive yourself as a business.
100%.
You are a business. Like you are your brand, you are your marketing, right? Especially in a world of social media.
I consider us realtors as marketers, not
That
even
we are.
like
That's
we're
what we
literally if you don't want to
That's
cold
what we
call
are.
and post social media every single day, do not become a realtor.
That is what we are. We are marketers. If you're not in this world of like marketing yourself, or trying to at least learn, because, I wasn't a marketer, but I had to learn, that we are in a different time frame now in life where, everything is out there in YouTube, in social media, then you have to do what you have to do for your business,
100%.
So, so those are, I think, the ones that are more professional because, you are going to drive that trust. You're going to be showing value consistently to your clients, and in results, you're going to get more clients too, outside of like your mom, your dad, your cousin's friends, which is majority of some realtors, why they go into the business to just help a cousin, and get a good commission,
100%. Do you want to wrap it up? I know you got to go.
Yeah. Well, hey, I just wanted to thank you for the time. It's been a great interview. I love talking real estate, on all things Miami, but we've covered so much, even like on the investment side, that I think hopefully, brings value to your viewers, your audience, and anybody out there.
Thank you so much for coming. Where can they find you? Because I'm going to put this, so this is on YouTube. I'm going to put it down below in the description of the video here.
So my Instagram is KarlaJ_RE. And I also have my YouTube channel. It's more for, Latin America clientele. That's Karla J Sales Miami. So you can find me in both of them, and any information that you guys might need, you're going to find me there.